welcome back to So Arizona. Today is finally the day that I get to harvest my apples, and it feels like forever since early spring when I saw those blossoms start to appear, and I have been watching and waiting and trying to protect these trees. I had a very unfortunate thing happen to my apple fruits last year. I had procrastinated with covering them. I knew that we had at least one squirrel in the area, and when I came out to thin the fruits, I discovered that that squirrel had eaten every single fruit off of the trees. So he had done all the thinning for me, 100% thinned, and I got no apples last year at all. So this year I was really on top of things. I was looking and watching and waiting for the apple blooms to be finished with their blooming and with being pollinated, and as soon as they were, I covered them up with this insect netting behind me, and I had to clip it on there. You may be noticing that my apple trees are growing flat against the wall, and that's because I prune them to do that. I'm using the espalier method, and that is where when the apples are really young, you prune and keep only the branches that are going to be growing on wires against the wall. It's just a way to trellis and support them, and it's a fantastic way to grow apples and lots of different fruits if you have a really small space, because you can grow them right against a wall or a fence. So that's what I'm doing here. When I got these apple trees, I was living in a much smaller space and really only had room to grow fruit trees along our fence, and so that is what I had intended for these apple trees to do, but we ended up moving before I planted them, and so I just brought them with me and I tried the experiment of growing them this way here, and it's worked out really well. Besides last year with a squirrel, I've gotten a couple of really good harvests, and this year, although the harvest is going to be late, the fruit looks really good and I can't wait to show it to you. So I've got my big blue bowl here. I love using this thing for harvesting fruit because when I'm finished I can step back and admire it, and it looks so beautiful in this bowl. So I've got my bowl and I am ready to start harvesting these apples. So the first thing that I am going to do is take all of this netting off, because I think that we can safely say that most of these apples are finished. Oh, a couple of them actually rolled out. Let's get this netting off. I just use these little spring clips and I clip it directly to the wires that are supporting the fruits, and it works out really well. It looks like, despite my best efforts, something has managed to take a little bite somehow. So far, just 2 casualties, but this is a really small spot, so I am not above cutting those out and using them to cook with or something like that. So I'm not gonna waste these apples. As I was thinking about harvesting these apples, I was thinking about how easy it is to get discouraged with gardening, especially if you're growing in a challenging climate like the Southwest. And I've spent my fair share of time feeling discouraged and feeling like you just can't grow anything here. And it is difficult. I'm not gonna tell you that it's not difficult, because it is, but I'm also here to tell you that it's really worthwhile, and that the more you stick with it and the more you do it, the better you get at it, because you get a lot more experience. And I guess that's just the way it is with lots of things in life. You get experience and you know how to problem solve, and you run into certain challenges and things for the first time, and then the next time that you run into those same exact challenges, then you know what to do and you know how to treat them, and that includes pests and diseases and environmental things and weather and all sorts of stuff that we run into with gardening. I shared with you about these apples that they were attacked by a squirrel last year and I got no fruit. Well, I learned from that, and as soon as those blossoms were finished being pollinated, this net went up, and so now I've got really nice apples. Now these are organic apples. I have not treated them or done anything with them other than cover them, and they are perfect and blemish free gluten-free, and I can attest to the fact that I did eat one last night without you. I'm sorry about that. I tried to wait and I just could not. And I had to have one and just to see how it was. So really, if you think about it, I was doing my research ahead of time. I've had trouble with lots of other things in the garden too. I have had leaf-footed bugs on my pomegranate trees. I've had trouble with birds pecking all of my figs and tomatoes. I have had leaf skeletonizers completely decimate my grapevines. And I've also had eggplants and ground cherries and radishes completely riddled with holes because of flea beetles. And I could just go on and on and on, like the leaf hoppers that introduced curly top disease to my tomatoes last year. And there are lots of different things that can happen. You might listen to this list and think, why on earth would I ever want to garden here? That sounds terrible. It sounds like a battle. But I promise you, those things do not happen all at once. Sometimes you get years where it's a little more challenging, and other times you get years where it's not so bad. And I find that the longer that I garden, the more I'm able to anticipate certain problems and head them off at the pass so that I don't have to worry about it so much. Like, for instance, these apples. I knew that squirrel was going to be waiting and watching for those little apples to appear. And during that part of the year, in April or so, when they are flowering, there's not a whole lot to eat for desert creatures. And so they are watching even more closely than we are to some of our plants. We spread out the salad bar before them and then we expect them to leave it alone. I don't think so. They're not going to do that. And so because of that, we have to be a little bit smarter. That means knowing when to treat, and that means knowing when to leave things alone. That means knowing when to cover things and when you can let them be in open air. I think some of these apples are actually ready and some of them are not. Side note, in case you're wondering how you know when to pick your apples or when they're ripe, when you pick them and you kind of pull up and towards you, if they come right off, then they're ready. And if they feel really hard to remove, like they're very attached to the apple tree, then let them have a little bit more time. And just because a lot of these apples are ready doesn't mean that they are all ready at the same time, because the blooms were pollinated at different times and they bloom over a couple of weeks of time, at least these do. So I've got 3 trees here. I have Annas on the ends and I have a golden Dorset in the middle. And I do that because it results in better pollination that way. That's a really good combination. So if you're thinking about apple trees, try that combination. Let's see. I don't think these are quite ready yet. Let's move down to the other side. There's not very many down there because the squirrel did serious damage to that tree last year. And unfortunately, one of them doesn't have any fruit at all. Look at all these apples already. I am so excited about this. It looks to me like the golden Dorset is holding its own. It has the most apples. One of the Annas is completely bare because the squirrel really did a number on that one. And then there are a few apples on the Annas on this end down here, but mostly it's golden Dorset. And the one I picked last night was a golden Dorset, actually too. And it was really, really good. So as I was thinking about all of these pest problems that I've had over the years and all of the lessons that I've learned, it got me thinking about how lucky we are that we have a grocery store, first of all, because if our crops and our gardens don't work out, we can still feed ourselves by going shopping. And that is something that people of the past did not have. And if their crop failed, then that was that. I actually remember my dad talking about one summer where their garden just didn't do very well. And my dad grew up in Appalachia and they didn't have a lot, but they depended on their garden for a lot of their food. And his mother would can and preserve and things. He said that there was one particular summer that the garden did really bad and they were really, really hungry in the winter because they just did not have as much as they usually did to eat. And I was just thinking about that and thinking, if my garden doesn't work out, if a squirrel comes and it eats all the fruits off, or if my tomatoes don't work out because they get a disease, I still have the option of going to the garden. But what if I didn't? What if I had to depend on it? what would I do and how would my actions change? And you know, gardening takes a lot of resources in the form of time and money. It's not cheap to start a garden. You need a lot of equipment in the very beginning, and I'm not gonna lie to you and say that you don't. You might be able in places like the Midwest where I grew up to just till open ground, and you're already probably going to have fertile soil there just because there's so much organic matter. But in other places like the West and the Southwest, we have to work really hard to build our soil, amend our soil, and to keep it healthy. And because those things don't just happen naturally. This is a very harsh environment. And I do have fairly good soil here in my garden, but I still have to work pretty hard at building it. All of that to say, spending my resources on a garden this size is a luxury, and I know that, and I really don't take it for granted. I love my garden. It is my happy place, and I appreciate it so much, and I love sharing it with all of you. But what would I do differently, and how would I treat it if I had to depend on this garden to eat, to survive? And if my actions would change because of that, then why aren't I treating it that way now? Now, I'm not really pointing the finger at myself or anyone else, because I know that I work hard in my garden, and I really, really work to make it as productive as possible. But there is a lot of room for improvement. Sometimes I just think, oh, whatever, you know, the tomatoes aren't doing well. I'll just try again in monsoon season because we get a second chance. That's also a luxury. But what would I do if I had to depend on it to live? I know it's not January 1st, and it is not the time of year when we usually make resolutions, but that's kind of a resolution that I have made for myself, is that I'm going to try to treat this garden as if my survival depended on it. And I'm going to try to steward it as best I can. I'm going to try to stay more vigilant on the pests, try to head off the rodents when they're plotting evil things to my vegetable patch, and I'm going to try really hard to make it as productive and as healthy as possible, even more so than now. I can't even lift the bowl anymore, y'all, so that you can see it. But really, the point of this video is not to talk about resolutions in the garden or doing better or worse. It's actually about encouraging you not to give up, because it's easy when you shuffle through posts on Instagram or when you look through videos on YouTube to see everybody else's garden thriving and looking beautiful. But I promise you that that is the highlight reel. You don't see the sweaty afternoons and the backaches and the pest loss and all of the rodents that are climbing over the walls or under the fence to try to get the things that you've worked so hard to grow. I promise you that is not reality. We all struggle, no matter how long we've been gardening, no matter how many successes we always have failures every single year. For instance, I have a lot of trouble with growing zucchini in this garden. I don't know why. I have grown zucchini successfully in other gardens, but here, for whatever reason, the plants really struggle. I have been able to grow Mexican gray squash and the black beauty zucchini pretty successfully, but when it comes to the yellow zucchini or summer squash and the crookneck squash, I have had a really, really hard time. Why? Why is that? It could be environmental. It could be the little ecosystem or the microclimate in my garden. I really have no idea, but I am not going to give up. I'm going to keep going because I really want to be able to grow a crookneck squash, mainly because I have a lot of good memories of it attached to my dad. He is the one who got me hooked on loving to eat crookneck squash, and he showed me how to cook it, and it is so delicious, and I have just been in pursuit of the most perfect crookneck squash since I started this garden here, and I am going to get one. And it may take me a few years, it may take me a lot of failures before I get success, but I promise you, I'm going to get a perfect crookneck squash. So if you have a plant that is particularly challenging for you, or a space that is really hard to grow in, don't give up. Just keep going, keep trying, keep it small until you get some success, and then expand, because gardening is so worth it. It is my happy place. It provides healthy food for my family, and even as important, it provides habitat for a lot of creatures that really struggle to survive in the desert. If you threw me over this wall and you told me I had to feed myself and keep myself safe and alive, I don't think I could do it. So it's amazing that these desert creatures can, and if I can provide a few flowers, a little nectar, some pollen, and occasionally a few apple fruits, then I am willing to do that. I hope that this encourages you to keep going with your garden and to keep learning, because I promise you, you are going to get successes along the way. I'm Kara from So Arizona. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy gardening.